Welcome back to Power and Politics. I'm Heather Fordham. New York City is in the middle of its primary election season, and today is the last day for early voting ahead of the primary this Tuesday. But more than 1 million New Yorkers cannot vote in this primary. New York operates under a strict closed primary system, meaning if you aren't registered with a specific party, you are locked out. Here with us to talk this all out is Jeremy Gruber, the Senior VP of Open Primaries. Jeremy, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's look at the numbers. It just said the City Campaign Finance Board reported recently that more than 1 million voters who legally cannot vote in the Democratic primaries because they are registered as independent voters. This poses the question of open primaries here in the city, something you have been pushing for. Tell us a little bit about what an open primary would do and how it could change what primaries look like.
Sure. Well, there's different forms of open primaries, but at their very basic sense, it allows independent voters, the fastest growing group of voters in New York City, to participate in primary elections. Increasingly, primary elections are the elections that matter in New York City, and specifically the Democratic Party primary, because there's a 5-to-1 voter registration advantage in New York City. It's actually 1.2 million independent voters in New York City. They can't participate in the elections that matter, and it is increasingly a threat to the democracy in our city.
And so opponents of open primaries often argue that private political parties should have every right to nominate or limit nominee selection to their own members. What is your response to that?
Well, I agree. I think that private party activities can and should remain private, but that's not what we're talking about here. Primaries are public elections. They are taxpayer funded, they're held in public buildings, on public machines, with publicly paid workers, and they're administered by our city and state government. These are public elections in every sense. That's why most New Yorkers, when you go to vote in the primary, your experience is exactly the same as the general election. They're identical, but with one distinct difference. Independents, over 1 million independents, cannot vote.
Zeroing in closely on the Bronx and Brooklyn, where winning the June Democratic primary often is the de facto election for November, that's due to low voter turnout, especially in the Bronx. From your perspective, how much is that low participation tied to closed primary rules?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that we have low participation in New York, but it's certainly true that when you shut out over 1 million voters, you are going to get less voters coming to the polls than if you allowed them to vote. And it's not just a general 1.2 million voters. We're talking about 54% of voters of color. 54% who cannot vote in New York City's elections. It's perverting the outcomes of these elections. They're unrepresentative, they're uninclusive. And that's why when city government has looked at this the prior Charter Revision Commission last year that was convened said that closed primaries are the #1 threat to democracy in this city. We need to change that.
Now, recently there was another hearing with Mamdani's new Code administration with public testimony that was really heavily centered around open primaries. What is the strategy to overcome pushback and get this issue back on a New York City ballot?
The strategy is this: independents are coming out more and more to be heard, to speak about their experience, and to let New Yorkers understand and appreciate what it means to be a second-class citizen in this city. There were over 200 independents that came out to last year's Charter Revision Commission hearings. We're already seeing dozens come forward, and in fact, many of them are being shut out by this current commission that's trying to limit their testimony, but they won't stop. We won't stop. I'm an independent voter myself. I haven't had a meaningful vote in this city in decades, and that has to change.
Do you feel as though if you are an independent voter, your vote doesn't count?
It doesn't count. It doesn't count at all. In the general election in this city are very uncompetitive. Many of them are uncontested. It's in the primary where the real meaningful choices happen, and there's over 1 million voters that can't participate in them. It's not right, it's not fair, and it's really against the character of democratic inclusiveness that this city is supposed to be emblematic of.
What does the fight look like behind the scenes to get this proposal moved forward?
We are organizing as independent voters across the city to be heard. Every kind of New Yorker is an independent voter. Large segments, over half of Latino voters in this city are independent voters. A third of young Black voters are independent voters. 57% of Gen Z voters, 54% of millennial voters. We are the largest and fastest growing group of voters in this city, and we need the right to vote. It's that simple.
Before he left office, former Mayor Adams tried to use the Charter Commission to put open primaries back on the ballot, like we mentioned earlier, but the pushback ultimately killed the proposal. What do you think, or how can your organization succeed in getting this to the finish line?
We need to organize. We need to organize the 1.2 million independent voters in the city, over half of whom are voters of color, to speak out, to say it's just not right to be a citizen in this city, to be a registered voter in this city, but not have the right to vote in the most meaningful elections that we offer. And that organizing, that voice, that buildup, it's just not stopping. It's growing harder, it's growing louder, and we need the right to vote. It's that simple.
All right, Jeremy, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much. This is Jeremy Gruber, Senior VP of Open Primaries.